Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening devoted to Monroe County history, and particularly a panel discussion by a group of people who are engaged in writing a new history of Monroe County. I am Paul Lucas from the Department of History at Indiana, and I will introduce the panelists, starting on the far right, Rose McElveen from the IU News Bureau, and also a regular columnist for the Herald Times. Ken Owen, a freelance writer, raconteur, and Indiana historian. Pam Service, who is a member of the City Council and is also the Monroe County historian and the curator at the Monroe County Museum. Jim Madison, my colleague from the IU History Department and editor of the Indiana Magazine of History, and Donna Ray, who is a student of history and a writer of history, and someone who we're happy to welcome to work with the rest of us. Also, several people are not here tonight or at least one that I know of, who will be working with us, and that is Bruce Hara Conforth, who is the archivist at Indiana University. And I might also mention that we have lost one member who was working with us, Timothy Sayre, who was with the IU Budget Office and unfortunately, or fortunately for Tim, is leaving to become Director of Campus Planning at IU Kokomo. Tim was with us for about a year and regretfully is going to take a better job, and so will leave the work to us. The format for this evening, and I hope that the members of the audience will feel free to join in. This is a panel discussion in which the audience is welcome to chime in at any time. Now, I can see most of you. There are thousands of you out there, and I welcome you on an evening when there are tornado warnings. There are so many tornadoes out there that apparently they're running into each other, but I welcome you at any rate, and I'm happy you came out to talk and listen to words of wisdom about Monroe County. What we're going to do is I have a series of questions in front of me, and I'll throw these questions out to the panelists, and we'll use those questions as a basis for discussion. And as I said, please feel free to enter in. If at the end of the hour or so we have any time left, why we'll open the session up for questions and answers. Very quickly, this project has been, I guess, stewing and fomenting, if that's a word. All right, not fomenting. I guess it's been in the hopper for the last couple of years, and it was occasioned by the Monroe County Historical Society's publication of a book of family history, which is out and is available. And it was decided by the members of the society that they would very much like to see a new history of Monroe County written. And several of us were volunteers primarily. We volunteered and we brought in other volunteers along the way. And I must say that we've been working slowly but hopefully carefully and measuredly in preparing to get this project underway. We've been greatly aided by the support of the society and the support of the community, and also by support from the Indiana Humanities Council through an Indiana Heritage Research Grant, which has carried us through this past year and is about to expire. So we've had a lot of support, and I must say there's been a lot of enthusiasm. The book hopefully will be published in about 3 years. And the IU Press has indicated that they will do the publication. So we're very enthusiastic about that, and that takes care of one of the questions that I was going to throw out. And I might as well complete that question by saying that at this time we're talking about a book which is about 250 pages long that will include many pictures as well as text, be of coffee table size, and probably cost in the neighborhood of $25. And I'm sure if you'd like to put in an early order, why the IU Press would be happy to take that order. Well, let's move right on to a discussion of the book and of the problem of writing local history and of the whys and wherefores of Monroe County. So I'm going to throw out this first question to the panel, and as soon as I see them wearing out, I'll move on to a second question. Panel, why do you think it's important for us to know and understand our history as a county? Does anybody want to? Rose, go ahead.
This is certainly not original. Somebody else said it, and it may be a paraphrase of it, but I firmly believe it, that if we don't know where we came from, we don't know who we are.
I think our history gives us a important sense of identity, which a community like Bloomington needs, because we are such a transit community. There's so many people coming in and out all the time. We need a real persona that people, when they come in, can recognize and identify with quickly, and that comes out of our history.
You both have raised interesting points. Can you give a specific instance of where knowing history of Monroe County might make a difference to someone who's like myself, who's been here for 22 years, or someone who's been here for just 22 days?
Well, from the practical standpoint, it's just kind of nice to know the cast of characters when you drop into a location, and some of the past cast of characters. But the past also helps us to explain what's going on now, and helps us to understand it better.
Yeah. Excuse me, go ahead, Pam.
Oh, just being on the city council, I see sort of the other end of the thing. But I think it's really important for people to have a sense of what their community is. We have a lot of times where there are major development proposals that come up before the city. Oftentimes people will get up and say, well, it's changing the character of our community. But in order to argue that strongly one way or another, you have to know what the character of the community is. And that has grown out. It's been a historical, biological kind of process. If you're going to decide where you want the community to go, in very concrete development, zoning, or whatever terms, you have to know where it has been and why it's the way it is now.
That's a good point. You said zoning. I'll throw this out at you. I don't know whether you can answer it, but does Monroe County have a strong history of zoning? Is that an Indiana tradition?
No.
No, and that might explain why it's a problem now, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
I think of right away of the movie Breaking Away and what that must have looked like to people outside. Here's Bloomington and the Cutters and the university and all that loveliness, but behind that was a very, very old Monroe County story of class differences, right? Am I correct? Or maybe I'm not correct.
Oh, no. Are you correct? Of course you are. You're an historian.
I couldn't be wrong.
Historians are by nature correct. Otherwise, they wouldn't be writing history. Which is why I am not an historian. No, it is an old story, but it is a story that seems to run counter to our Hoosier myth of equality and of having a classless society, that we, all of us Hoosiers, are created free and equal, and no one person is any less or any better than any other. But Steve Tesich, who of course didn't know about such things because he was born in Yugoslavia, grew up in Lake County and then came to college in Bloomington, perceived a certain set of inequalities, which he was so bold as to turn into a screenplay. And yes, it does challenge a great many things that we like to think about ourselves, that we do not, in fact, have social and economic differences that separate one person from another into classes. This is delightful Hoosier myth, and indeed is an extension of the American myth about the American dream. But like so many other things about what we presume to call geology, or rather reality, there is a geology, layers and layers of years and perceptions and personal histories that underlie this surface that we're exploring.
Ken, I think you've put your finger, you may not be a historian, but you certainly put your finger, maybe your whole fist right now, on I think, an interesting aspect. You mentioned the American dream of equality and opportunity, and then you related that specifically to the movie Breaking Away, where you see the difference between the university, the affluent university community, and the so-called Cutters, who graduate from high school and then face an uncertain future, clearly without the opportunities that and I remember particularly the juxtaposition, if I'm using that word, between the leading bicyclist and his girlfriend on the university campus, who was a sorority girl. Excuse me, go ahead.
Without diminishing the accomplishments of the author of that screenplay, at some point in time, it might be worthwhile gently to say that the term cutter is incorrect. Townspeople are townies or stonies, but not cutters.
Well, Tesic was dealing with the Serbian word for the oppressed underclass, the proletariat, which is kuta. And I don't know whether that's Serbian or Croat. It's one or the other. Maybe Montenegrin.
Well, you can't expect an outsider to get it all right.
No, and he never had.
With that as a background, let me throw this at my colleague Jim Madison as a historian. Why is local history important, Jim?
I mean, I have to answer it truthfully now since Kent's already put me in that position. Well, I think I can pick up on things that have already been said there, particularly by Pam Service, and maybe begin by reminding you of the phenomenon of roots now maybe 10 years ago. And I think that did strike a chord, not only in the black community but across America. That's a genuine chord. A human need to be connected, to have some roots, some sense of place. There's a lot of talk these days about a global society and a global economy, even to the point where now our Indiana politicians are convinced that there's a world beyond the borders of Indiana, which they weren't for the first 170 years or so of this state's history. And of course, yes, we are a part of an international and global economy and society and culture. But we all know, and those of us who've lived for any length of time in a place know, the important ways in which we are connected locally. And I think that sense of place is terribly important. I think it's inevitable that one develops that sense of place as one lives in a community, as one ages and matures. One of the things I would hope this book would do, and one of the things I hope local history does, is to help speed up that process of development, particularly for younger people, even in the schools, in the public schools, and younger people in their 20s and 30s who move to Bloomington, who are going to, if they stay here, develop roots in a sense of place. But I hope this book, this local history, will help that process occur more quickly and help those roots set a little deeper and the tree flower a little more to carry the imagery. So I think that's why local history is important. The second reason I think it's important is because it's fun, and that's sometimes a good enough reason to do some things.
You mentioned well, I have a question later on down the line about who this book might have, to whom this book would appeal, so maybe I'll just hold off on that. But let me move on to the next phase, and that is to talk about the history that exists. And some of you can comment on this. What's wrong with the history we already know? That is, what's wrong with what we know about Monroe County? Isn't it enough? I mean, there are a couple of books on Monroe County. What's wrong with that stuff? Yeah, Rose?
Well, first of all, we haven't had a history, any history written since the one that was in the early 1900s, and a great deal's happened to Bloomington since then, and we need to cover that area. As to the quality of those histories, they were what could be called in the publishing industry quick and dirty. They were commercial publishing firms. There were a fair number of them in the late 1800s and early 1900s. They brought a troupe of research gophers to Bloomington who did a quick survey of the history, collected as much as they could, made no real effort, as far as I can tell, to verify the facts, then the dates and so forth, and slapped them together. And one other comment in relation to the vanity biographies. There's always a heading on those, no matter what county you're looking at, that says prominent people in the county, and there were a lot of prominent people not in the book for the very simple reason they were unwilling to pay to have their names, their biographies put in the book. So They're very stylized. If you go to the Monroe County Library, to the Indiana room, and you take a look upstairs at what they're like, they're very stylized. And in my estimation, they're incredibly dull.
I agree with your estimation.
Part of they're good resource material. I mean, if you're doing some research, they list the people who bought land in each little township at a certain time, and you can earn the biographical material. That which is there is interesting if you happen to be doing some research on an area where a character that who paid to have his biography in there is there. It's good basic material, but I don't think we really had what we generally now consider a history book of Monroe. I don't think we ever really have had one that sits back and analyzes and takes a look at the big picture and puts the details into that picture. So it's more than time that we did have one. Here we are, the seat of the state university, and we don't even have a history of ourselves.
You're absolutely right. And the 19th century histories were largely money-making operations. They were ego-centered in that they were designed to flatter the egos of the people that they served. Your comment, though, is about their accuracy is interesting. Is that generally true? Are most of these histories reliable? My sense is that they vary considerably.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, they do.
But are the Monroe County histories pretty good, as far as, or has anyone really tested them to find out if
They're the only source in some cases.
I just wondered.
When I've been writing looking back articles, I have sometimes bounced the material of the histories, say against the census figures and census rolls, to be on the safe side, or I have gone down to the clerk's office and taken a look at some of the court cases to verify dates and the names of people and so forth.
Well, I think you're absolutely right in that the comments, both good and bad, about these histories, and I think I might add another comment, and that is to say that the big picture you mentioned is certainly missing from those books. There's no effort to do any of the kinds of things that we've been talking that local history should do. Either tell the story of the people or to relate that story to the big picture. For example, you can read and I've read parts of what's available, and you'll find no mention of the Industrial Revolution in the United States. You'll certainly find no mention of race as a factor or a problem. You'll find no mention of hardly any of the kinds of things that we cover at the university in our freshman surveys. And you wonder, we clearly write a different kind of history today than they did in those days. Ken, you?
Paul, it occurs to me that the popular, commercially sponsored histories of the late 19th century are very revealing for several reasons, chief among them that they present an idealized portrait of the county, in many cases for the purposes of economic development.
Mm-hmm.
This is a matter of recruiting a local college, a local factory, persuading immigrants to come here and set up shop and settle. So that in many ways, local and county histories do in fact present the portrait that has been touched up, that the warts have been removed in many cases, that the lighting is a little better, that the dark spots are touched up or lightened up. And in effect, then, the history of Monroe County that we have from the late 19th century is what the Monroe Countians of the day, at least those who were paying for it, wanted to have said about themselves, about their community. And that is instructive. That gives us some idea, I think, of what kind of values, of what ideals, if you will, of what sense of community those persons wished to project to a larger readership.
I'd like to suggest that maybe we ought to do different here, because when I have four cars ahead of me at a four-way stop sign, And when I get in other moments and when I think that Bloomington is growing too rapidly, becoming too big, maybe we want to write a history that makes Bloomington look like a dreadful place, so no one else comes here.
Distribute it widely.
That's the Oregon approach to the writing of history, exactly. Excuse me, Rose.
When Kent was talking about the warts being removed from some of the county history, it reminds me of, in looking back articles, I have touched on 2 or 3 occasions on the serious problem we had on the Whitecappers. And for those who don't know who Whitecappers were, they were self-appointed attitude adjusters, and if indeed they didn't think people behaved in the right way, they visited them in the middle of the night and switched them very badly or whipped them or whatever. And you don't see that in either one of the earlier county histories, and it certainly was a problem here, and it was it was not unique to Monroe County, but it's certainly something that, you know, we should not overlook.
Well, that moves me right into my next question, which is what should our history include? And I think both your comment, Kent's comment, and Jim all bear on these. Should we write a book that includes the warts and all? That is, should we tell a balanced story, even if it doesn't make us look so good? After all, Monroe County is growing quickly. There are businesses coming in, new people. Do we want to talk about a sordid history of vice and racism and political corruption or whatever that we might find?
Maybe just what attracts them.
And do we have the pictures to go with it?
I got a few. I think if we're going to pretend that this is history, we have to do
right.
that. We have to be honest. And it certainly, Chicago, I don't think is hurt by the image of what happened in the 30s and the gangster. I mean, it's growing like topsy anyway. And we don't have that sort of extremes. I mean, we're not talking about major character flaws or anything of that nature. We're talking about the sort of thing that happened in any other community in the United States. But if we don't incorporate, you know, these things in with the rest of history, we're not being honest. It isn't history. It's just like the vanity stuff of the last century.
We have excuse me, Jim?
Well, I think the earlier histories were exclusive. They excluded certain kinds of people, excluded certain kinds of subjects. And I think this history needs to be inclusive, to be as wide and embracing as it possibly can be in reaching out and incorporating into the story of this particular place all the people that we know lived here and still live here, and all the kinds of activities and behaviors and ideas that they had and that human beings everywhere have. And any other kind of history is a history that really is hard to take seriously for an intelligent reader.
We had a comment from the audience, I think.
I disagree with this about the self-appointed business of the Whitecappers. Now, in Owen County, right after the Civil War, there were elections of committees in each of the townships to appoint regulators who were to, because I believe Paul Lucas mentioned in a lecture last year at Mather's Museum that we had a problem all over the United States concerning lawlessness. We certainly had it here in Bloomington, and you can't confuse the pro-Southern, which were the Knights of the Golden Circle, and headed in Indiana by a man named William A. Bowles of French Lick. Now, he was a colonel in the Mexican War, had very powerful friends in this country, and one of his closest friends was Jefferson Davis, with whom there are quite a bit of correspondence concerned between the two. Now, he was arrested during the Civil War for treason and was going to be executed. And Abraham Lincoln commuted his sentence to imprisonment in the federal penitentiary in Columbus, Ohio. Well, he was released after the war and went back to French Lick and so forth. Okay. He was certainly pro-Southern. His second wife, or maybe it's been his third because he was divorced several times, was a Kentucky woman. and they brought 7 slaves to French Lick. And they remained slaves, but that's the way things were. Now here in Bloomington, we had a pro-South led by Cornelius Merson, who was a slave catcher along with 2 Corso brothers. Now, it ties into this white capper business. The white cappers in Bloomington and Monroe County were the same type of thing of regulators as in Owen County. We see things concerning the Wild West. There were people who took up, they stood up against lawlessness. Now, the white cappers in Bloomington were led by ex-Union soldiers, some of them officers. And there were deacons on that particular patrol that was certainly quite notorious nationally when Crook Merson and Hoosier Merson were arrested for murdering an itinerant who had come to Bloomington and got quite drunk. And I think you'll find in the Theodore St. Wiley journal that he mentions Pete Wayner's saloon, but that wasn't where that it was committed. He should have said it was Oscar Saller's saloon. Wayner's saloon was connected. However, there were certainly what Theodore St. Wiley, he said that he might have said good riddance to bad rubbish. That underlay what he said. Now, people down in New Albany said the Ku Kluxers were at this, but this is an entirely different organization. Although they did in Monroe County wear hoods and white robes.
That seems to me, if you will permit the interruption, an important point about the underlying strain of populism throughout the whole history of the state. And that populism, in some cases, produced the excesses of the Klan in the late teens and 1920s, but also the excesses of the white cappers and the other regulators earlier in the state's history, but these are not necessarily identical. But they are aspects of the same kind of popular movement, the same kind of urge to have the people take charge, lest government fall into the hands of elected public officials. I think that's right. Is that right, Jim?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
I know that the white cappers died out in the teens. I know that one of the last things mentioned, the Indianapolis News was terribly anti-Bloomington, and the university be always shipped up there. But they were incessantly putting down Bloomington in editorials of certain things that happened, particularly to white capping, which happened all over the country in certain forms. But we could have had the last laugh, but our papers kept still when an incident of white capping happened in Indianapolis, and the Washington Indiana Democrat, really lambasted Indianapolis, and they had the last comeuppance. Anyway.
I always thought that the nursing lobby put an end to white capping because of defamation of character.
It can be.
Panel, what can we do, or what should we do about the fact, along the line of what we've been talking about, of stories that have not been told properly? Many local histories are notorious for being histories of the rich and the famous, and chronicles of the activities of the well-born and the well-bred. How are we going to handle that?
Well, that's a tough one. I think any historian worth his or her salt today is convinced of the necessity of doing that. The question is, how do you do that? How do you write this inclusive history? How do you write what is sometimes called history from the bottom up, or the history of ordinary people, or the history of everyday life, which is something I think, as I say, every historian wants to do, and something that distinguishes historians in the late 20th century from historians 100 years or so ago. There are ways, techniques, and methods that have been developed to do that. None of them provides the absolute key to doing any of that. One particular kind of technique or method is statistical analysis, and we do have statistical data from Monroe County, particularly from the U.S. Census reports, but from other reports as well. And so we can say things about infant mortality rates, for example, which are one of my favorite pieces of statistical data because they tell us a great deal, not only about how many babies died before they reached their first birthday, and Donna Ray can tell us even more about this, but that reflects a much broader sense of the quality of health care and really the quality of life in a particular place. So we have statistical data. We have oral history interviews for the recent past. Some of those have been done, some of them 10 or more years ago, I guess. But it's a tough question. We have photographs, which help. There's no single answer to it.
Yeah, when I was going through the museum collection, pulling out photographs that I thought might work into this book, and we are talking about a heavily photographic kind of book, I was trying to focus in on ones that showed what life was like at a given time, given place, rather than pictures of leading citizens sitting there in front of the photographer looking stuffed, or pictures of major buildings, just the building. If it's an important building, at least to have people in front of it, cars, something that gives it sort of a snapshot of life, kind of a look. And I think that will help too, if we are selective in the photographs that really show. And sometimes it's hard to do that because the things you really want to have pictures of, nobody thought of taking a picture of. Just the family sitting around after dinner, listening to the radio. I don't have pictures like that, but that made up a lot of people's lives. But in some cases, you have ones that come close in on that. We've got some individual people pictures that I pulled out. I tried again to stay away from individuals just standing there, but this is a neat picture of Daniel Kirkwood and Theophilus Wiley and Reverend Minton of the First Presbyterian Church standing there, obviously totally candid picture in front of a railroad car, arguing apparently about something. It's an interesting picture, even though it's important people. It has a little life to it. But here's a picture of the Nuri 4th of July parade, the Mirror Company, just going down the street with just ordinary employees of the company sitting there on the float. There's the pictures in schools of kids just sitting around their school desks. This is the sort of thing that I hope we can highlight.
Some people are going to ask us, is this just going to be another history of the university? How are we going to answer that?
I don't think you can separate the history of the university from the history of the Bloomington community or from Monroe County, but what has been done in the past is that the university has been set off in its own section in the history.
Is there a story to be told about the university that has not been told? And maybe you've put your finger on it, Rose. You say we have Tom Clark's magnificent volumes on the university, but is the story of the university in the Monroe County setting, has that been told? Let's say the relationships between the university and the communities.
I don't think the impact of the university on the community has ever really been told. And of course, since the time of the last history up until now, the impact has been enormous. And I think that's one way in which it could be approached.
I read an irate letter to the editor in the local paper it's been 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago, in which the author talks about the wage structure in Monroe County and says that, well, everyone knows that the wages are low in Monroe County because the university won't pay anything, and everyone else takes their cue from the university. Now, is that, I won't ask you to comment on the veracity of that, but this person wrote it and said everyone knows that. Well, I didn't know that. I mean, that's not something that we talk about at the breakfast table, but that certainly would be a kind of relationship between community and university that would be worth exploring, wouldn't it?
Well, Paul, it's the relationship between university knowledge and common knowledge, or university knowledge and common sense. What we, the people, hold to be self-evident, and certain home truths that may not have penetrated the confines of the old Dunn farm. Seems to me that a large part of what makes Monroe County, and Bloomington in particular, distinctive must be centered in Indiana University, its history, its legends, its mystique, especially when one moves the perspective from which one views this area, this history, from the place itself to a transcendent location, so that we take into account what Tokyo thinks of Indiana University, what Berlin or Paris or Rome or Rio may think of Indiana University. And very often, those locations, the persons there, think of it in relation to the Kinsey Institute, to the School of Music, to a timid young man by the name of Robert Montgomery Knight, or a coach by the name of Jim Councilman. They may think of it in relation to Herman Muller or Herbert Muller, may think of it in relation to the late lamented School of Letters, to a great many things that are directly connected to Indiana University. For that reason, I think what may make us singular, if not altogether unique, will be in many ways Indiana University. We are not limited, however, as a culture, as a society, by whatever Indiana University has produced and bestowed upon us. I think that that is the important thing, that the history of Monroe County must be seen as considerably richer, more expansive, and livelier than what the university culture would provide. Does that overstate the case?
No, I think along the same line, I'll ask the question, the obvious question. We've dwelt on Bloomington and Monroe and the university. What about the rest of the county? Are we going to write a history of Bloomington, or are we going to write a history of the county?
Yeah, I think we are going to write a history of the county, and I think to follow from Kent, we're really going to try to, I hope, juggle three balls and interweave them. One, the university; two, the city of Bloomington; and three, the whole county, from Harrodsburg and Smithville to Ellettsville, and all the farms and folks in between. And I don't think we can go about doing that by segregating and separating. I don't think we can have, I hope we're not going to have, a chapter on the university and a chapter on the county and a chapter on Bloomington. It'd be easy to do that, it'd be much easier to do that, but I think the far better way to do it is to integrate it and to bring forth the connections, because they really are connected, all three of those places. The folks who live in Harrodsburg often end up working at the university and or in Bloomington. And there are all sorts of other ways in which the connections and relationships are there. And I think the challenge for us up here is to find those connections and bring them forth.
As was pointed out, there already are quite adequate histories of the university, and we don't really want to repeat that. We don't need to list when each new president came on and when this and that faculty expanded. What we need to know is when these things affected the community as a whole. Mm-hmm. Like when Wells became chancellor and president. That had a major effect on the community, because the effect he had on the university was to tremendously expand the directions it went, the size, the student body, everything else. That is something that we need to bring out, that transition in the time of the university as it affected the community. But there are a lot of things in the history of the university that don't really make any more difference than in the history of any individual family, which is important to the family, but its impact on the community is negligible. So I agree. I think maybe it wouldn't be a good idea to have a separate university chapter, but integrate all of that together.
Is there, along the same line I was just thinking, is there something, or are there any things unique about Monroe County that would make it stand out among all the counties in Indiana or whatever? I mean, is there any particular reason why someone would want to pick up our book and read just to learn something that they might not find in the history of Shelby County or Warren County, Iowa, or such? For example, the university, I can think right of the university, I'm sure, has shaped the growth of Bloomington in ways that most probably people don't realize. For example, I'm thinking of some research that another member of the history department directed a couple of years ago, in which they found in the census of 1880 and 1900 in there, particularly 1880, they found in a small community like Bloomington, they found that the literacy was above the national average, the number of years in school, and there were all kinds of things that indicated a community that was very closely tied to what was then a very small university. The fact that almost every home had at least one university student living in it. And then compare that with a county at that time, where the number of years attended in school was way below the average, and the income was way below the average. So go ahead, Rose, you wanted to make a comment. I
was just going to say that I'm not sure I can answer your question about what makes Monroe County absolutely unique. But when I think about Bloomington, and we might as well say the county as well, there's this strange contradiction between the university as a cosmopolitan community within a larger community that is not cosmopolitan. There are two other thoughts that occur to me about the relationship to the university. I suspect the statistics would indicate that we have a fairly high number of university graduates in this community for the very simple reason that of the convenience of the university's presence. Another thing that occurs to me is the World War II was a watershed as far as the growth of the university was concerned, and it was the GI Bill that suddenly the university just suddenly burst at the seams, and we started building buildings to keep up with it. And what Pam was saying, we don't need a separate chapter, but what we need is these relationships, because obviously as the university increased in size, there were the community, the merchants, the number of merchants increased because of the demand for them.
I don't know if there's really anything that's really outrageously unique about Monroe County. The combination might be unique. There are many communities that have large universities. There are other communities that have major industries that rely on natural resources, such as limestone in our case. There are others that may have had, big furniture factories or something like that. But the combination we have is somewhat unique, but not that outrageously unique. Not that people would say, this community is just so fantastically different, we have to search out a book on it. But I think that in some ways that's good. I think that what we've got here is, on the whole, a fairly typical American community with its own little quirks. But so I think that allows us to focus in on what makes a typical American community, rather than focusing in on what is aberrant about the community. In some, if you're doing history of some communities, you'd end up focusing in on that particular feature that everybody associates with. Even if it were, say, like at the confluence of two major rivers, you'd end up focusing that would be the theme of your history. The crossroads of America, or whatever. And you'd lose a lot of the ordinary stuff that people were living every day.
Yeah, Rose.
I thought of something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Unique. Monroe County was the center of population in the United States, and that center of population was found to be a snake-infested briary thicket in Benton Township until business and scientific heads recalculated it and discovered that it was downtown.
Now, may I
actually on Martin Street.
Sure.
Now, Rose knows whereof she speaks, but just this last weekend, I talked with and I emphasize this, a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter who during his days on the Herald telephone, late and lamented, did a piece on the siting of the center of population. And according to him, it was placed on the near west side in an almost entirely black neighborhood. And that the city fathers decided that this was too much of an indignity for such a marker to have to bear up under. So they moved it downtown to the courthouse lawn. or thereabouts, and that it was a racist matter, not a matter of brambles and thickets and swamps. This is a matter we'll have to sort out, quite obviously, but I do want to take exception, if I may, not just to Ms. McElveen, but to Ms. Service, on the uniqueness or the singularity of Monroe County and Bloomington. For all of the things that we seem to have in common with other Midwestern, or at least southern Midwestern counties, I believe there are factors that do set us apart, almost to the point, if we are not utterly unique, or just unique, you can't qualify unique, we are quite different. Pam may not see it this way because she is a Californian, which has to be taken into account. This will not impugn her motives, but it will say something about her perspective on the mind run of humanity. I think that we are at a point of confluence between cosmopolitan university elite culture, if you will, and a down-home Hoosier culture, and that confluence or conflict or clash has produced some very interesting results. If one talks about this place with persons from other parts of the world, as I have rather insistently, not deliberately, but insistently, I am amused and very often surprised by what comes up about us, that there is a Bloomington mystique, or if you expand it to the edges of the county, a Monroe County mystique. We are a musical center, not simply because of the Beaux-Arts Trio or because of Janis Starker or because of the riches of the School of Music. We are a center because of John Cougar Mellencamp, because of Sheila Stevens, because of a very active rhythm and blues and rock and roll and home industry, almost cottage industry recording business around here. We are known for our music. And we are known in Liverpool, and we are known in Yokohama. We are known in some parts of the world because of a rich literary culture, which may have begun with the publication of the New Purchase to scandalize local society, but which was certainly evident in the works of James Woodburn as a popular historian, which certainly picked up 40 years ago with the publication of Ross Lockridge's Raintree County. And today we have authors, poets, essayists, novelists living and working right here in Monroe County. James Alexander Thom is a good example of a local colorist, a writer who uses the area and exploits it marvelously well. Are you exploiting the area in outer space and interstate
Well, now,
space?
yes, I've got 3 books that have said right here.
The point that I would make, whether it has to do with PCBs, whether it has to do with the Indiana University basketball team or swimming team or track team, whether it has to do with the School of Letters, whether it has to do with this place, we have created about ourselves a mystique. And we are perceived in ways that Martinsville is not perceived, or even Columbus is perceived, although Columbus has its own mystique, which is worth considering. What I submit is, and this is a matter that I intend to investigate closely, trying to ward off sentimentality on one hand and just sheer fraudulence on the other. I am eager to know what accounts for how we are perceived, how we are understood as a community. And many of those things are not simply reducible to the census returns, or who lived in what neighborhood when, or what the relative incomes were. Many of these things have to do with the star-dusted lyrics of Hoagie Carmichael. Many of them have to do with the Book Nook and the Bent Eagles. A lot of them have to do with the down-hominess of William Lowe Bryan. But they also have a reality.
Well, I don't know. I don't know whether or not we have that kind of an aura around us. But my perception is that Monroe County has most of the major elements of the American story in it, as opposed to I don't want to pick on Warren County, Iowa, but I know Warren County, Iowa, and Warren County, Iowa doesn't have all the elements of the American story. But there's agriculture here. There is the high culture, low culture split that you note. There's industry, the Industrial Revolution. There's class. There's race. There's progress. There's small homogeneous communities. There's diversity. And I think we have to keep in mind that thousands of IU alums are going to read our book and are going to remember that they were nurtured here also. So we have lots. I have to put that in case the audience is getting a sense that we're anti-IU. We're certainly not. But this is, I think, a very good story to tell, and a story that, while there may not be a uniqueness here, certainly. And there may well be a uniqueness. We'll figure that out. We may have two books. But certainly it's a story that people ought to read, because I think it's a very American, very typical American story. Well, we're getting a little short on time, and there are a couple of other things I wanted to cover before we gave up. The next item, obviously, who is going to read this new book? Is it going to be an academic book full of footnotes and academic jargon like infrastructure and the high culture, low culture, and things like that? Or are we going to write a popular book that has pop-up cartoons and things like that? What are we going to do? Rose?
Scratch and sniff.
I have an absolutely marvelous book at home that some of you might have heard of. It's called 1066 and All That. It's sort of a classic, and it has, in the introduction, it has this statement: history is not what you thought, it is what you can remember. All other history defeats itself. And I'd like to make a plea for a readable history, that when people have put it down, they have not used it only for reference, but they will put it down with some knowledge that they have absorbed because they have enjoyed it. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think I agree with you very strongly, Rose, and I think that means that there's a cost to that kind of history, and I'm willing to pay that cost and to admit it up front, at least for my own purpose here, that this book will not be a reference book. You won't be able to pull it off the shelf and find the name of every family, of every church, the date the church was founded, the schools listed by names. I don't think it's going to have that kind of detailed reference purpose. You may find the answers to some questions. There'll be an index, and you can look in the index, and it may provide answers to some questions. But I hope it's going to be a book that, rather than serves that kind of reference function, is going to serve the kind of function that Rose is talking about, a book that can be read and that can be absorbed and can help to create these kinds of roots and understandings of place.
I can't tell you how many times people have come into the museum and to our gift shop there and said, I'm looking for a book about Bloomington to send home to my mother for Christmas. And there just isn't one. And I think that there is a built-in market for people out there. There's a constantly turning over market. You know, every 4 years, totally new people are here looking for something to send to their relatives for Christmas about the town where they are spending, the 4 years or 8 years or whatever of their lives. And it's not just for the people coming into the university, but it's something that all of us have at some point wanted something like that, and it just is not available. This last week I was, several weeks ago actually, on the gift committee to buy gifts for our sister city delegation, the 13 people from Luqiao, Taiwan. And we wanted to buy a whole bunch of books and with lots of pictures and stuff that would show them something about the city that they had formed this alliance with. And there just wasn't anything available that gave a good flavor of what Bloomington and Monroe County are like. I think that's what we need, not an academic detailed reference book, but something that gives a good overview that people can read and look at the pictures and come away with a much better grounding in where we're from.
I might add, by the way, for those of you who are watching this program, and the thousands of people who are here can barely be accommodated by all the seats, but they've been very quiet, that the profits from this book are not going to go to our pockets. The money that this group is going to receive, the money that this group is going to receive will probably barely cover the cost of typing paper. But the purpose of the book is to raise money for the Monroe County Historical Society, and specifically to establish a publications fund that will allow books and diaries and letters to be published in the future. One of the things that is very obvious when you look at Monroe County is that the lack of materials available, and we hope to help remedy that by giving a publication fund, a research fund, if you will, a good shot on the arm. So that's where the royalties from this book, assuming there are any, will ultimately wind up. And I might add, there's a lot of high-priced talent here, and the talent is, for the most part, volunteer. And so I think I'm not asking for mercy, but I just want you to know that this is not a group of people who are here at $5,000 an hour, which is, I think, what Jim Wright's attorney is getting as he appears. Do we need any help? And I address this to the audience. Yes, we do need help. If anyone out there is interested in helping us or would like to volunteer time or whatever, we would be happy to have you get a hold of me or get a hold of anyone in the Historical Society. Call Pam Service at the Monroe County Museum. And if you have any letters, diaries, or anything like that that might be useful, books, newspapers, pictures, please let us know about those. Let us borrow them, at least read them. Let us copy them if possible.
I'd like to make a particular appeal.
Go ahead, Pam.
Appeal for pictures.
Yes.
We have a fairly good museum collection. We've been open 10 years, and people have been bringing in pictures over that time. But they're big gaps, and I know there are pictures out there in the community that people have that could really help illustrate aspects of our history, which we'd like to illustrate. So I suggest bring them into the museum. We'll have them copied. You get back the original, and then you get the picture in the book.
Before we open it up for questions from the floor, those of you who are watching will probably have noticed by now that one member of our panel has been conspicuously silent. And you're going to say, boy, have they done a number on poor Donna Ray. That is not true. Donna is probably somewhat intimidated by this group, but let me very quickly say that Rose McElveen is going to be working heavily on the limestone industry. Ken Owen is going to handle the cultural history of the county, and Pam is working on the prehistory, incidentally, the Indians, and we haven't given her much chance to talk about the Indians, but Jim Madison is going to be working primarily on the 20th century. I'm going to be working mainly on the 19th century, and Donna is going to do something that is very interesting, in that she's going to talk about the development of one of the major I guess you'd say industries, and certainly an important facet of Monroe County today, and that's the medical community and the hospital. So Donna, you have a couple of minutes if you'd like.
2 minutes, huh?
2 minutes. Yeah.
I am going to write about the medical history of Monroe County, and to answer one of these questions, how do you write a history and what is your source? Some of the sources that I've been using are public health records. I've been to the Indiana State Library to search through some of their volumes. I've been to the Indiana Historical Society. They've just recently published a book about a surgeon who was during this same period of time that I'll be writing about, that will help lend some ideas of what may have happened or what happened during that time. I spent several days with B. Snoddy, who was local secretary at the hospital for, I think, more than 30 years, to learn firsthand knowledge of working with the nursing school and physicians and just general running of the hospital. I've done some oral histories with retired physicians who practice in Monroe County before antibiotics and after antibiotics, and what a change that was. I've talked to professors at the IU School of Medicine, and that was a major part of the training of physicians. In the beginning, they were just, they learned by being with another physician. And I'll be touching on the aspects of the training and licensing of physicians. And another aspect I'll be looking at is the effect of wars on medicine. So it'd be kind of encompassing with the university and general life, and how life changes, how medicine, how physicians treated something as simple as a sore throat or as difficult as a heart attack in the 1800s, and how that's treated today. So basically, that's what. Well, I got the floor. I'm not giving it up.
No,
okay.
go ahead. It's yours. The light closes
Okay,
in 25
in
minutes.
25 minutes.
You have it. Yes.
One thing I was thinking about when Kent was speaking was about the mystique Bloomington has and how we're perceived by other communities. And I think we're perceived by who's looking at us. If it's industry, and these will be people who will be purchasing the books, if it's industry that's coming here, potential new employees, management people, they can look at the book and see what Bloomington is and who are the people, where they're coming from, and where they're going. I think it could be a general interest book. I think the school should be able to use it very well. And I think new people just looking at Bloomington, new professors coming in, new business people can use this book. And I think it should be used maybe by the Welcome community, whatever their group is called, to welcome new people to Bloomington. So I think there'd be a great deal of use. It can be used for gifts, as Pam said, because if you've ever sent a young person away to school, you want to know something about the town that your child, your young person is attending. So I think it's a very helpful book.
I think that is a real audience, and I agree with you strongly, Donna. But I'm not going to give up the hope that among the people who are going to learn something from this book are people like, let's say, Janet Dunn and Mr. Leffler and some of the others who know a great deal about the history of Monroe County. But I hope, and they'll have to tell us 3 or 4 years down the road, but I hope that they might learn something too from this book.
Let me ask a question of Donna along the lines of what Jim Mattis has proposed. This will undo some of my ignorance, not all of it, but some of it. I was denied a Monroe County birthright back in 1938 while my parents were living in Spencer, because according to every tale that is still around in the family, the Bloomington Hospital had the highest infant mortality rate in southern Indiana, or at least in south central Indiana. Do you recall why my mother had to be taken to Indianapolis to Coleman Hospital so I could be delivered there? Because the local hospital was so dreadful. Would that have been true at the time?
I don't think I could answer that. I mean, I could say.
Not under oath.
She's got to plead professional privilege. She's an historian.
Well, there are many answers to a question like that, but I will withhold most of them.
You got to buy the book.
Buy the book. All right, good. Let me.
I would like to say that I certainly survived arriving in the Bloomington Hospital.
Oh, my dear, if I had only known.
Let me add very quickly, Janet Dunn has a question. Let me add the composition of this panel is there are 2 Bloomington natives, or at least Monroe County natives. I believe, Donna, you're you're not.
No, I'm not.
I'm sorry.
I moved
But
here.
Jim is. Jim is not either?
No.
Oh, there's
But
one.
we've been here a long time.
You've been here a long time.
We've been here over 20
There's
years.
one, Rose. There's one, Pam from California. There's Kent from Indiana, and I'm from Iowa, and Jim is from Pennsylvania. But we're all longtime residents in Monroe County. Now with that, Janet, go right ahead.
Well, what I want is for y'all to hurry up and get it out for 3 years.
Oh, sure.
I am so excited about you doing this. I think it is something that we really, truly need. And in spite of what you all say, we are unique.
May I quote you, Janet? I'm collecting evidence.
Thanks. Yeah, Bob, go right ahead.
Donna,
Yes.
could you use anything about the social services in Monroe County, in Bloomington, Monroe County?
Yes. Yes, I
Mary
could.
Baldwin, Cecil Baldwin gave me a lot of material, most of it went to the museum, but I have her theses. She 1924, 25, that she received her PhD. And I have her theses, which are tell all about the history of Monroe County social services. And I was amazed that by 1920, we had 20 of them, and Big Sister and Big Brother was one of them. And I thought that was fairly recent, so it shows how much I know about it. But you're certainly welcome.
Yes, I'd like to read that. Thank you.
I think they go to the Lilly Library, but you certainly may have them.
Thank you.
May I say that we hope to have forums like this more than just this one before the book comes out, to keep that appetite whetted, but also maybe to start a tradition again of getting together and talking about Monroe County history. We've done this is our second time this week that we've done it, and it's been very useful, not just for us, but for people in general. So maybe something like that will happen as well. Someone here wanted to make a comment. Didn't they? Rose?
I would like to put in a bid on the health front for that marvelous story about the wells downtown in front of the stores, and the outhouse on the courthouse lawn, and the inability of county residents or city people to see any relationship between the sudden rash of ailments and the arrival of a man from the State Department of Health who dropped a concentrated blue dye in the outhouse and drew blue water out of the wells around the square within fairly short order, within a couple of hours. I think that kind of story needs to be...
That kind of story will be used, and I also have a cartoon that will go along with that, of like a typhoid germ sitting at the town pump. So, and this was, I think, out of the Indianapolis Star. So, those are fun stories, and I think that they'll make the reading readable.
Sir, yeah.
This is not a profound analysis of the problem, but just for your development in this area, it is a fact, I think, as the first dean of the graduate school, Eigenman was the first surgery patient at Louisville Hospital, and he survived. That was the beginning of the hospital. Were several blind fish removed from his gullet at that time?
Janet?
Well, I think it's like and you have gotten it, I'm sure, already. We have a hospital because the ladies of the city of Louisville decided we had to have it.
Yeah.
And the hospital is still owned by the local council of women.
Why, let me ask you a question, since in almost any other place there is a county hospital. Why no county hospital in this county?
And women...
There never was one?
Themselves.
But there never was any...
We have county people on the board. And we, I think, are given... I'm not sure whether we get any money at all. They do take care of some of the debt.
Because they get $50,000 a year?
They may. They used to. Yeah, you were on there. I've just been on the foundation.
The hospital was started because of the... I'm sorry, Cliff.
I think we still are unique because it is the only one in the country, I think, that's owned by women. Correct?
It's a magnificent institution.
May I add a jackleg opinion to that, which I hope will be worked into somebody's presentation. It seems to me that much of what makes us a singular community has been the presence of women's leadership at levels of great significance in this community in comparison with other communities of comparable size and social and economic composition. That we have, and I hope this doesn't sound patronizing, I think we have been blessed by unusually bright and able women who have been in positions to express their talents for the good of the entire community. And my guess is that this is not evident in comparable communities. Now that, as I say, is a jackleg opinion that is put forward as a thesis which will have to be investigated. That I think that this is one of the reasons for what makes us single.
I think you'll find that Rose Hill Cemetery was taken over by the group of women here in them, and they're the ones that pass it over to the city. That's another thing.
That's just what I thought, from the cradle to the grave, from the hospital to Rose Hill.
By the way, oh, I'm sorry.
No, but can I, there's a comment, I'll come back to you, Bob. Go ahead. You'll have to speak up a little.
Well, I'm speaking from the point of view of a librarian. This project is really needed.
Yeah.
I help people constantly who come asking for a history of Monroe County, because we have some information, and there's that volume of, and it's just not enough. So this is definitely needed a project, and please have a good index.
Good index, good point. Yeah.
I have been observing Amal El Toma at work when people come in here asking for a really good history of Monroe County, and I have noticed that most often she gives them a copy of James Joyce's Ulysses or one of the Henry Miller books, either Tropic of Cancer or Tropic of Capricorn, and you have helped to create some remarkable impressions of the community.
Not Raintree County, though.
No.
I give them grand feedback.
You do give the Raintree County. But you don't urge that they see the movie, I take it. Part of it. Bob, go ahead.
This has to do with the water problem. And what brought it up is that blue dye on the north side of the courthouse, the outhouse there, flowing down to the well of college by where Blank One is now. But this has to do with just after the Indianapolis and Southern Railway was built, all the blasting that occurred in the cutting of all the stone and so forth in order to clear the tracks. They had to pass a law forbidding anyone to use their wells because they became contaminated. The water that flowed through. They were allowed to use cisterns. So this was about 1904 or 5 in there. And that is a facet of the water problem we've always had here. I know that, oddly enough, when one of the reasons Bloomington was founded where it is, besides the fact that the university had, or the seminary rather, had nice springs down there, which were quite flowing. Just north of Abner Blair's log cabin, which is on the northeast corner of what is now Madison and Fifth, there was quite a flowing spring there. That impressed the commissioners appointed by the state. Now, the first commissioners were really from other counties. Now, there's also one on the southeast corner of 6th and what is now Madison. Then there was one up the main spring, which has quite a history about it. There are anecdotes about it. There's between 7th and 8th Street, what was then Spring Street, now Morton Street. And there were so many springs. You know, there are many branches throwing on. You have Spanker's Branch, you have the eastern Spanker's Branch, which is the Jordan River and everything, and there's those kind of things are all over Bloomington, particularly in the wet season. And evidently at that time, being such a small community, a village, why, it was all right at those times, but there's been a water problem ever since, in some form or another.
Yeah, if I may put in a plug then for chapter 1, which is my chapter. Actually, I'm very lucky to have that chapter because it starts about 600 million years ago and ends in 1816. So why I'm lucky is because there's no one around who can tell me it wasn't that way. But I'm doing the best to try to get a close approximation of what actually happened during that considerable period of time. But actually, it isn't just an academic matter of vague interest. It directly relates to very real things like this question of the water shortage. This was a recurrent theme throughout our history, and it's because of the geologic past, where we have the springs and where we have the karstography, the sinkholes, and all this sort of thing, comes directly out of our geologic past, and it has had a very profound impact on us. The agricultural history of the community. True, we do have agriculture, that is a part of our history, but this is not, and never really has been, a major agricultural community for very specific geologic reasons. The glaciers didn't come here. We have these lovely scenic hills, but we have very shallow, nasty soil on hills and hollows. And you see that theme all the way through the Indian history. The thousands and thousands of years that Indians lived here, this was a very marginal area. And they only really lived here with any intensity when the population size was such that they were forced out of the more desirable areas into Monroe County.
Let me put you on the spot, Councilman or Councilwoman. Are you suggesting that maybe we're limited in our development possibilities? Are we going to reach a point where we don't go any further?
I think that's a very significant consideration. We just recently had an out-of-town developer drop sort of a development bombshell on us and say, "Here, we're going to come in and do this for you." But Bloomington isn't like a lot of other communities because we do have some real physical constraints on the kind of development that can go on here. We've seen this with what are we going to do with all our solid waste. You know, we've got a landfill that's filling up. It's in the only part of the county really where you can have a landfill. The state says you've got to have another one. You've got to do something. You can't. You're running out of space. Where are we going to put it? There is no place geologically that is safe to put it. If you put it in an incinerator, then you get a whole lot of other problems develop. This sort of thing, you know, you like to think that you know, you don't really have to read those early chapters in the history book because it doesn't affect you, but it does. Right?
Sure. Sure. Well, we're about out of time. We are out of time. So there are a lot of topics that we haven't covered. We haven't talked about religion, which is a big part of Monroe County's history. We haven't talked about the good old American staple, the speculation bomb, which someone told me the other day there are 450 realtors in Monroe County right now. There are a lot of topics. Come back the next time. But I want to thank the members of the audience. And again, it's a bad night. It's a dark and stormy night, as Snoopy would say. And we have a crowd. I estimate closely at around 180,000 people here, give or take 179,800. But I want to thank the people in the audience, ladies and gentlemen, the members of the panel. This has been a lot of fun. And have a safe moment. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Massive applause.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Pam?
Oh, yeah.
Those
You sounded like the scholar of the group.
You probably know. It was just
The only one who's done serious.
when
She's the only one
the
who's done
visitors
serious
to the
content
university
tonight.
club
I thought you had smiling.
down to the railway station.